to The Green Pretenders,
a sustainably challenged podcast.
My name is Simon.
And my name's Sian, and this episode we are talking about something that's hot, hot, hot. We're talking about heating in your home.
Yes, we are.
The cold is drawing in, isn't it?
It really is. It's getting cold and autumnal. I love the word autumnal.
It's just a lovely multi-sensory word.
Yes, and I always think of warm colours.
And cinnamony smells.
Mulled wine and mulled cider. And it fits in with today's topic of heating.
Completely. So if you're anything like us, the last couple of weeks might have prompted you to crank up the heating or maybe turn it on for the first time this year. That's certainly been the case in my flat. I don't know about you, Simon, but we've turned on the heating for the first time.
Yes, we have as well. It was actually when I came back from Austria and it was so cold. It was a little bit warmer there and we just had to turn on the heating. And I actually felt a little bit guilty.
Yeah, I do, completely. I always think that the best case scenario would be to just be able to keep layering up and not have to turn on the heating. And I guess our consciences say that that's the right way to go. But there's a point at which if you're wearing socks and slippers and 2 jumpers and you're still cold, it gets tricky, doesn't it?
It really does, yeah. And I try, but I get cold hands and cold feet very easily. And it sounds a bit funny, but I actually get a cold nose. And when I feel like that, it gets to a point where I'm like, this is too much. I don't want to suffer.
There's something unnatural about having a cold nose in your own home, definitely.
Especially now, because of the pandemic, a lot of people are working from home, or a lot of people are at home because they lost their jobs because of the economic impact. So, we're spending more time at home. And yeah, so what can we do? What choices do we have?
I guess the first and most obvious thing, maybe we'll start small. We'll start with the things that we can do every day in our homes. And the first thing is to take whatever temperature you tend to set your thermostat to and knock a degree off. Just start by knocking one off, because if everyone did that across the country, that's a difference made. And you can save up to like 80 quid a year just from knocking 1 degree down on your thermostat. And maybe £80 a year doesn't sound a lot, but invest in a wool jumper with that 80 quid and bada bing, bada boom.
Exactly, and that's it. It's not only about saving the planet, it's also about saving a bit of money. And we all know that times are tough. So I think a lot of our listeners would be very interested and happy to save a few pounds.
What is your ideal thermostat temperature, out of interest?
So, I was raised on 22 degrees as room temperature. Now, I know that is very high, but that's what I was brought up in. So, I've moved house now, and I know that 22 degrees is too high. So the ideal temperature would be between 18 and 19 degrees. So we're aiming for 19 degrees. We're choosing the higher end, but yeah, so 19 degrees is what we're aiming for.
That's a great shout.
Ideal would be 18 if we could bring it down to 18, but yeah. How about you?
Yeah, we're the same. I think at the moment it's on 19, and I think 18 feels like that should be the 1 degree that I'm knocking off. Maybe we need to put little motivational notes next to the thermostat, or like little reminders that's like, go put a jumper on.
Now, checking the thermostat is not the only thing we can do. We can also check where is our heat actually coming from. And we live in London, and in London it's usually an individual gas boiler. Is that the same in your house, Sian? Is it central heating?
Yes, indeed.
Yeah, it's not only an environmental concern, it's also a safety concern that boiler is up to scratch. So check with your landlord, check the boiler, check that it's not leaking, that it's not too old, check that you have a gas safety certificate. All of these things need to be checked.
Yeah, and push them to not just do what's absolutely necessary, because I think boilers are a bit like things like cars. Some of us wait until something goes wrong to then get it repaired or checked on, whereas we should see maintenance of something like a boiler as just checking that it's still optimal functioning. So even if nothing's going actively wrong with it, you can push your landlord to say, well, we should get it checked to make sure it's still tip top. You should also check with your landlords about who is providing your gas and electricity, who are your energy suppliers, because there are a lot of energy suppliers now who deal solely in renewable or at least carbon neutral energy. So we, in my flat, recently switched to bulb because they were basically doing it for free. They're really pushing to get more people on board, and their electricity is 100% renewable and the gas is carbon neutral, so they offset it, which I guess there are some kind of greenwashing elements of carbon neutrality. What does that actually mean? But so you can look to see if Bulb are offering a free setup in your area, and if so, it's just a win-win. There's literally no downside of switching over to them.
Yes, absolutely. So we're with Bulb as well. When it comes to electricity, we're not with gas because that was paid by the landlord and we were on a flat rate. We're quite sure that we paid too much. But, I would definitely recommend to take control, because then you are, in control of how much gas you're using. In the new flat, we're looking at Octopus Energy, actually, for electricity and gas.
Yes. Yeah, I don't know as much about them, but are they a bit newer?
I think they're a bit newer, yeah.
Yeah. Other eco-friendly energy suppliers are available, as a BBC broadcaster would say.
I think what we want to stress is get to grips with it, read up on it, look up different suppliers and where their electricity is coming from, because not all electricity is equal. Yes, electricity comes from the grid, but in the grid there's actually a lot of nuclear energy, there's a lot of still energy from coal, and so basically we want you to check with your supplier whether that is renewable energy or not, because that is something you can control. You can control who you pay for your electricity, and in that way choose a supplier that is sustainable.
And it's absolutely mad to be charged a flat rate for gas like you have been, Simon, because surely it doesn't incentivise you to be careful around your heating, because if they're going to charge you the same anyway.
Exactly. Ramp it up. Have a little heat party. Have 30 degrees indoors. Yeah, it's absolutely crazy when there's not even an incentive to save energy. No more.
No more. Another small thing we can do at home is have curtains closed as often as possible. I think nowadays most homes have, double glazing and windows that are much more effective for insulation. But curtains also make a big difference. So the minute it gets dark, and obviously as it gets darker sooner, whip round the house and just close all the curtains, especially in rooms that you're not even going to use, and it doesn't make a difference. Maybe you have ugly curtains and you hate them and you hate looking at them, but if you're not going to have to be in that room, close those curtains, and that's just an extra level of insulation all around the house or the flat.
And if you are thinking about getting new curtains, then think about getting really thick curtains. Get lovely ones, because thick curtains actually prevent the heat from escaping through your window, and that can save you a bit of energy as well. And they can also prevent drafts if your windows aren't great, if they're not double glazing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, drafts are the worst, aren't they? Because your heating can be as effective as it wants, but just one tiny little mysterious draft just blows through your bones like, ugh.
Yeah, and in our old flat, there were many a draft. It was really weird. Like, the windows weren't great. That was the first thing. But then there was also a mysterious draft under the kitchen sink.
Oh.
Yeah, and we were like, is there legitimately a hole in the wall? You could feel it when you, opened the cupboard. It was ridiculous. So if your flat is like that, you might want to move. But also, you can add individual insulation. So what I've done, I've added insulation to my window, for example. You can get some at Leyland's or, B&Q. They're basically a foam strip that you can just... It has like a sticky surface on one side and you can just put it in the window.
Yeah, I feel like there's draft excluders. Is that what they're called? And it's something that is almost quite old-fashioned or seen as a bit kitsch or retro to have a big, maybe it's like in the shape of a snake or like a big long sausage dog, and you put it at the bottom of the door, and that used to be quite a standard thing in people's homes, but I feel like they've gone a bit, they're not very vogue anymore, or maybe people think they're not necessary, but maybe it's time to bring back the draft excluder.
Yeah, bring them back. And they also kind of look cute. It's only for winter, really.
Yeah. And speaking of insulation, another thing that for the rental generation it's probably a bit harder to have control over, but are the wall cavities and the loft in your property well insulated with, the most kind of cutting edge materials that really do the trick? Because if not, that's something that, again, can make just such a huge difference. And I do think that landlords, even if you are renting, landlords should have some sense of responsibility or conscience for the sake of the environment and your bills and everything. So even if it's not your own home, check in with your landlord, ask what the current insulation status is in the loft or the wall cavities.
Yeah, and next time suggest that they insulate the loft properly, because it will also increase the value of their property.
Yeah, also suggest that they, just leave some houses for the rest of us, if you don't mind.
Yes, please. I read that for flats that are not properly insulated, you lose 35% of heat through the walls and 25% of heat through the roof. And I mean, that's over half of your heating, just literally down the drain. Not literally down the drain, but out of the window.
Yeah.
You're basically heating the area around you.
It would be like using a sieve as a bowl.
Yeah.
Anyway, moving on to bigger things then. If you happen to be someone who is about to build a house or buy a house and you have control over the bigger picture stuff, the structural stuff, what options do people have to eco up their property?
Well, what springs to mind are solar panels. I know that is a bit controversial in the UK because the UK is not the sunniest place on earth, but I saw this article about solar panels in the UK and how a tiny amount of land used for solar energy could power the whole country. So if you can, get some solar panels. You can also retrofit these quite nicely.
And it's the kind of thing where the technology is getting better and better every year, and you can now get these little portable personal solar panels that are, you can kind of just move them around the home, set them up wherever the light happens to be falling the most. And even if that only generates enough to kind of power one thing that you use a lot, that's still a little win, and actually quite an interesting thing to engage with, maybe quite fun to kind of keep track of how much energy you're getting and what's the optimum placement for it. I feel like I'd get quite a lot out of that.
Yeah, I think so too. My sister had one for travelling, and to be fair, she said that it needed like a lot of sun burning down. Yeah, so they didn't get that much out of it. But technology is improving. We also need to be a little bit mindful with these things because we don't want to produce more waste.
I think this idea of there being an area in the UK that if it were to be designated for solar panels could power the country, that is an excellent thing to include in emails to your MP when you're trying to reiterate the fact that we want a green recovery from the pandemic and for the environment to take centre stage once we're back to some semblance of normal. Get that conversation going.
Yeah, write those emails, pester them. And also, if you do own a home, or if you're thinking about buying, or if you own 70 properties up and down the country, then think about the insulation of each of those properties. It is really, really important that we properly insulate our buildings in this country. And I have to say, we are very behind compared to other European countries. We're very behind in properly insulating our homes, and it's a major producer of CO2, of emissions, and we need to fix this problem. And there are actually schemes by local councils, there's schemes by the government, and it doesn't always have to be, styrofoam or new materials. You can actually upcycle old clothes, for example, or other, reused materials.
Can you use eco bricks?
Yeah, I mean, you could probably use eco bricks. You'd have to get very creative with that, but
I love it. Another form of heating if you have the funds and wherewithal to be putting it in from the start, is geothermal heating, which takes the heat from inside the ground and deep down in the earth. And that's a big deal from what I have heard. It takes a lot of money. The upfront costs will be huge, but, you're set then. You're set for life. Because as much as the UK doesn't experience much sun, inside the ground isn't really going to change. It's always going to be warmer than the surface temperature, so...
Yeah, 100% geothermal heating. That is one thing that my dad really regrets, not using that as heating in my parental home. He says he wish he would have gone for that. I mean, they've been living in that property for, 40 years, almost? It would have well paid off.
That's a really good fable, and great that we have someone's personal experience of that, because I guess when you're in your 20s or your 30s, the chances of thinking that far ahead or trusting in that far ahead is quite remote, isn't it? Or quite abstract. You're not going to think, oh, I'll definitely still be in this house this many years down the line. But maybe it's just a case of going for it.
I think so. And I think he even thought about retrofitting one, but he said it, wouldn't pay off for them.
So if you're in your 20s or your 30s and you feel pretty settled and you feel like you're maybe in your forever home, that's definitely something that could be an absolutely banging shout for your purse strings and for the environment in the long run.
Definitely. And because we live in a capitalist society, it will increase the value of your property. I mean, imagine you're trying to sell your home and you say to a buyer, there's geothermal heating, so your heating costs will be extremely low. It does cost a little bit of electricity. It does use electricity, but yeah, it's negligible compared to gas or oil, which are really on the way out, or even pellets.
Yeah, so that takes us on nicely actually to the next kind of option, which is wood burners. And they are seemingly getting a lot better and more eco-friendly than they ever have been, and more effective. I was reading about how you can now use sawdust pellets in wood burners, and you can all be sitting in the lounge and the wood burner is this kind of localized, concentrated atmospheric heat, and it doesn't really matter if the rest of the house is like icicles. Take a water bottle to bed and you're done.
I mean, yeah, that is my dream. If I should ever have a home, I would love to have a wood-burning oven. Or even an open fireplace, but you do have to consider that, burning wood produces CO2 and the wood has also to grow somewhere.
That's why I think the sawdust pellet thing is quite a good progression for wood burners, because sawdust is going to be like an offshoot rather than cutting down trees just to make wood to burn.
Yeah, exactly. Now, I'd love to sit next to a wood-burning oven now and have a cup of tea and have a conversation with you.
Yeah. Toast some marshmallows. So I don't think I have much else to say about it. I'm sure we've missed loads of stuff, but that's the beauty of then our listeners telling us all the things that they do at home and things that we've missed.
I think one thing that I would like to add, because I mentioned at the beginning of the episode that I grew up in a house that was 22 degrees all year round. If you have kids, that's a perfect opportunity to educate them and to raise them in an eco-friendly way. And you can make it a game. You can actually appoint someone to watch the thermostat. You can appoint someone to watch that all the lights are switched off, and you can make them little eco-warriors.
That is so lovely. And you can make them little badges like the thermostat warden. And now I think we're going to give you some eco-whoops and poops.
Yes, shall we start with the not so good stuff?
Yes. Do you want to go first or shall I?
Right, I go first. So this is a very sad one, a very personal one. Anyone who knows Sian and myself knows that we love glitter. We love to wear glitter, we love to run around at festivals covered in glitter. And there was this lovely, eco-friendly, biodegradable, wonderful alternative sold to us, the other day I found out that it's not eco-friendly at all. It's just as bad for the marine environment.
Oh. I know this sounds dramatic, but like this feels a bit much now. 2020 is just doling out too much bad news and I just can't. I'm actually close to crying. How?
Exactly, because I remember we were so excited.
Yeah.
And they're taking it away from us. Just like everything else. Everything is cancelled and now they're cancelling glitter.
Maybe we need to do some controlled experiments with it. Like put the glitter in different solutions and leave it there for months and see what happens. I don't know. Become our own scientists. Because you just can't trust anything these days, can you?
Oh, that is very true.
It could be fake news.
Could be fake news.
Fingers crossed. My eco poop is strangely similar, and this was a coincidence. We don't align our eco poops and poops before we record. I read this week that biodegradable bin liners that are sold to us as the very good compostable eco alternative to plastic bin liners are really, really bad for the soil. And there's this big expose that actually, yes, it does biodegrade, so they are literally telling us a truth, saying they're biodegradable. But what they are made of is awful for the soil as they break down. It's just a minefield, guys, isn't it? I'm going to share the Twitter thread that I read this on because it's very articulate and it explains in a scientific way what I've just blurted out in a very nonsensical way. But yeah, the poops this week are just that thing that a tag or a label of eco-friendly doesn't always mean exactly what we think it means. And we need to be resilient to finding out that solutions aren't always solutions, because it can make you just want to give up altogether, can't it? Like, well, fuck it then, no choice we make is going to be the right one. But what we really need to do is just keep trucking.
Right, on to happier things. Eco Whoop. So my Eco Whoop this week is that I read that IKEA, the world's largest supplier of furniture, a global company, is going to start their first second-hand furniture store in Sweden. And I think that is major news because everyone has IKEA furniture, almost everyone obviously, but it's so widespread. And I think by 2030 they want to only use reusable materials and second-hand. So I think it's that this is a great eco whoop. It's going to really make a difference.
Totally. And even if you wouldn't benefit from that as a consumer, if you really don't like the idea of buying secondhand, if you have old IKEA furniture, they're doing a buyback scheme. So you could be the one to provide the secondhand furniture and you get vouchers in return.
Yes.
My eco whoop is far less practical. It's a thing about cheese. Pilgrim's Choice cheese have just really reduced their packaging, and I know that probably we shouldn't be eating cheese anyway, but I for one am not emotionally ready to give up cheese, especially now what with the whole glitter hit. I'm not in an emotional place to give up cheese as well. But they've reduced their packaging so that now the block of cheese looks like a vacuum packed sort of brick, and it's great because it's just like, that's so obvious. Why does cheese need to come in packaging that has surplus plastic? Just pack it really tight. And on another food note, to tie into this eco whoop of guilty pleasures with food, the other day I really wanted a fried chicken wrap, but what I made was I cut up some corn nuggets and I had some dressing and I mixed it all up with cheese because I love cheese, and with some avocado and with some crunchy onion toppings, and made this wrap, and it was just as satisfying as the kind of crispy chicken hit that I needed, but it was not with real chicken.
Yay! Meat-free hangover food.
Exactly, that was exactly what it was, and that's the moment where often I'm weak and I just go, do you know what, I'm going to get the meat or just be naughty. But no, yeah, I pushed through with the alternative and it was really delicious.
Nice. Right, I think that's it for this episode. So if you have any ideas of how to solve Sian and my glitter problem, or you have any other tips for the house to save energy, to save on gas bills, where can people get in touch, Sian?
You can find us on social media. We're at Green Pretenders on Twitter and Instagram, and on Facebook. You can also drop us an email, thegreenpretenders@gmail.com.
If you have a bit of spare time, leave us a review on iTunes, comment on YouTube. We're here for you.
We are. And the last thing, as always, remember,
The pod is always greener.